You, you want to start? Do I start? What do you want? We just sat through the Blu-ray edition of The Force Awakens. And since we didn't get to review it last year when it came out, and since it's one of the biggest movies of all time at this point, it only made sense we should talk about this one.
So I had big anticipation for this because, let's face it, we're definitely both in the boats that the prequel trilogy did not live up to the expectations we had. So with this one, I was trying not to get my hopes up too much, but everything just looked so great. But the things that bugged me the most, I mean, J.J. Abrams, shame on you. There's not one I can't do this with a straight face. There was not one single Utini or sand person through the entire movie. I mean, and that's really all the negative things I have to say about this movie.
Well, those are important aspects of the mythology.
Yeah.
You need to have those in, or else you don't have a Star Wars movie. I mean, where's the midichlorians? Where? Way back in the 90s.
In a different galaxy.
They're way back in the 90s. We're good.
Further away.
We're good. Not to step on your toes.
No,
that was my biggest complaint.
We're good. No, my toes are fine. No, seriously, in all seriousness. I love the movie. I can't say enough good things about it. It was everything I wanted it to be and more. Went and saw it on the Thursday night early release, and I felt like a little kid again watching this movie. I mean, I'm usually, the most active I get in a movie is I'll, like lean forward in my seat. One of our friends actually keeps count of how many times I lean forward in a movie, and he determines that's how much I like a movie. The more times I lean forward in excitement is...
I'm the same way.
So this movie, I think I was sitting forward almost the entire movie, and at points towards the end of the film, I think we definitely spoiler filled at this point. If you haven't seen it by now, shame on you. It's been 4 months. It's been out on Blu-ray for about 2 weeks in the U.S. And with our huge fan base that we have watching this show, I'm pretty sure most of you have already seen this. If you haven't, stop this right now. Go to Redbox or Best Buy or somewhere. Buy it or rent it, watch it, then come back and watch this.
Yeah.
Or don't watch this. I mean, whatever. Well, no, watch this. But I'm just gonna be the complete opposite of Batman v Superman review. I'm just going to ramble on about how much I love this movie. So hopefully I can say some more interesting and critically reviewing things than just like, oh, it was great, I loved it.
Well, that's why this made sense to me. It's like we opened up and we basically fired across all bows on the first one, and it's like, that wasn't quite the way that we hope to do these from now on. We're trying to make them fun, more positive. Props. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, no, we want to make this positive. We want to make them fun, and we're more invested in the reasons we love something than hate it. Yes. And that was definitely challenging on the first review that we both were like, let's sit down and talk about this movie. So in the case of Star Wars Force Awakens, I mean, it was, I gotta say, the first time I saw it, I was a little lukewarm on it.
Lukewarm, I like what you did there.
Well, yeah. I told you, we're gonna have puns. This is puns. There's no way around it. We can't not do it. I mean, Star Wars is too ingrained in our culture and in our DNA too, that we can't not have at least a couple puns in this video. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would basically the hype leading up to this movie for me turned it into, I didn't know if I should expect this level, because I've been fooled before by previews. I'm sure many people have, and in the case of this one, I wanted my excitement to be tempered for the most part. So when I saw it in the theater, there was a certain amount of, well, I saw it, and that was about it. But watching it just now, it reminded me that, you know, this is still a fun movie. It's got Star Wars at its heart, and in that way, I gotta say my enjoyment of it and my love for it actually has risen at least 2 or 3 fold compared to when I saw it in the theater. So I'm actually glad I got to review it off of this viewing tonight more than the original viewing. So might have to do that sometimes. We'll go back and watch something again.
You've seen it twice now, right?
I've seen it twice.
Okay.
I've only had the time to see it twice. Yes.
Understood.
So,
I've seen it at least a dozen times since I bought the Blu-ray.
This guy knows his stuff, and he probably. How many times did you see it in the theater?
A couple.
Yeah. So basically, anything I say, don't listen to me.
No.
Because I've only gone twice.
I think I fare pretty well with the fan hype building up to stuff. It either I don't care, or I kind of, after episode 1, I stopped trying to formulate as much of my own opinion about these things because I had an awesome idea from what episode 1 should have been from the trailers. And I didn't get that, so I stopped doing that. At least as hardcore as I did with that one. But when the first trailer for this came out,
that was the teaser one.
The teaser one with all that, and then when the last one came out with like the different musical rendition of the themes and stuff, it just gave me I could not have been more excited for a movie. Mm-hmm. And for me, this movie did not disappoint on really any level. Although, no, there was one thing, and this is a genuine, it's not even a complaint, but a disappointment is I thought Captain Phasma would be in it more. I love, between what we see in the movie, I absolutely love of that character. Between all the behind the scenes and, magazines and different articles and stuff I've read about her, and the books that they had that built up around this, the Journey to the Force Awakens books, which I highly recommend, especially before the Awakening. Because you'll learn if you read that book that when she tells Hux in the movie that this is Finn's first, or FN 2187's first, infraction or whatever, it's the first time he messed up, she's just flat out lying. And I don't know if that's her trying to protect her reputation and the people who are training under her, because Finn's, one of the stormtroopers under her command, or if, and this is my fan theories now working in the mind, and maybe someone else has said this out here in the webs, what if maybe she's a mole in the Empire? And she let them, I don't know. That's probably ludicrous and crazy. We'll see, but that's just in my mind. She seems like a really cool character. I mean, she's the knight in shining armor. She's literally the knight in shining armor in this movie, but she's on the wrong side. So I'm kind of intrigued to see where this goes. And maybe not little known fact, if you're a Star Wars fan and following this stuff a lot, you probably know this, but her armor is built from the armor of one of Chancellor Palpatine's old Naboo cruisers. That's why it's that shiny metal. It's her nod to him, which was thinking, well, maybe she's connected to Naboo and all this stuff. But yeah, in one of the notes somewhere, her armor is supposed to be the melted down plating from one of those shuttles.
That's cool. I didn't know that. Okay. All right. Well then, the first thing that I'd actually like to say about this movie is I was very impressed by the sheer the ninja-like way that they promoted it. They didn't give you a huge amount of stuff. They gave you just the right amount of taste and the right amount of visuals and the music cues to let it sink in that you're actually getting a Star Wars movie that it might not be directed by Lucas or have Lucas's involvement in it, but you're getting a movie that cares about Star Wars. And I mean, prequels being what they are and all that stuff, it's like the fans haven't been able to see a movie like that since 1983. So that's interesting to me. Like, my mind was, well, how does this play into it? How does that play into it? And you have all the trailers put together, and even then, you still don't have enough to figure out what exactly is going to happen in this movie. So that was mind blowing to me in this day and age, and the fact that the leaks weren't even out to figure out how this stuff worked. I thought that was great. So going into this movie, I really did feel like, well, show me what you're gonna do, and I enjoyed it. I love that it had enough feeling of the originals, the original trilogy at least, to at least touch upon those feelings, touch upon the nostalgia of that, but then you're moving forward with these new characters that are bringing new life into the franchise. And they're characters that you get enough of who they are to go like, well, what might happen to them going forward or whatever. I think the mystery woman, yes. I got to admit, if I had to say anything probably less than positive, being that it's J.J. Abrams, I felt like, well, of course she's going to be a mystery. Of course they're going to make Rey be a mystery. Of course they're not going to have everything there is to know about this girl. And but what kind of drove me nuts is then they're like, well, I'm not going to tell you. We're going to pass the baton, and now it's up to the next guy to figure it out for you. And it's like, okay, that's all well and good and stuff, but I feel like if you want to talk about the originals going into this, it's like that was one of those stories for me where I'm like, that's where the new twist on the storytelling begins to me. Mm-hmm. Like, the originals never had a mystery per se. They never had...
You didn't know it was a mystery until they told you it was a mystery.
And the only way that you... Like the closest thing that you had in the originals to that was you have the whole Luke talking to Ben in Ben's hut, and him saying, oh, I thought my father was a navigator on a space freighter. Yeah, and then Ben's telling him the background of what really was going on. And that was it. And then that turned into a mystery just by the story going that way rather than it being something left for the audience to figure out between movies. And granted, that movie started as, well, we're going to tell a tale and it's going to be finished in one movie just in case nobody watches another one. So in this way, it's like they got me there where it's like, okay, we're going to keep this line and this through line of who Rey is going into these other movies. And there's a part of me that's a little annoyed because that's a new part of the mythology.
Yeah.
But
I think, and I'm guilty of this as well. It wasn't until the last couple weeks that I changed my mind about who Rey, who her parents might be. I'm now at the point where this is one of those things where fans latched on. I mean, she says in the line of dialogue with BB-8, BB-8, she's like, where are you from? And he's like, classified. She's like, oh, me too. Big secret or big mystery or something like that. She just says it offhand.
I never caught that.
I don't think she really cares as long as they come back for her. I think the fans, and like I said, I'm very as guilty of this too, because I don't know how many conversations I had about this immediately following the movie about who she was or wasn't. And for those of you arguing she's Han and Leia's kid, don't you think they would have known they had another child?
You'd think Leia would know based on the fact of childbirth.
Right. I mean, unless there's some sort of...
that out there.
I mean, I guess, they could have...
that just seems like...
that aside, I don't think the mystery of who her parents are going to actually be that important to the story going forward.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, too, is in this movie in particular, you have Han and Leia, where, Han's kind of the... I don't want to call him a deadbeat dad, but he's kind of a dad that gave up on being a dad, in a sense. Like, the fact that, okay, now I lost my child to the dark side, and I'm going to go back to doing what I know how to do because that's the most responsibility I want in this galaxy at this point. And Leia has that whole speech with him about, bring our son back. And so the fact that was something that needed to be done in this movie says to me, she's not their kid. Because if that was the case, they would have been trying to get to her way faster. And anything like the connection between her and Leia in this movie, I don't look at it as a mother and daughter thing. I look at it as here's a character who she was up there with the guys through all of the first trilogy, and she's a character that she kind of sees herself in Rey. Like, she sees that, you know, Rey is also a stand-up kind of girl. She's not going to let the guys dictate to her what she needs to do. She does what she feels is right. And I look at it as a genuine mutual respect between the two of them. And plus, Rey doesn't have a mother. So I think Leia kind of sees a little bit of that and going, well, I couldn't be a mother to my son, but I can be almost like a mother figure to this girl who's now helping the cause in that way.
You know, and you never see, Rey never talks about, she never talks about wanting her family. Yeah. We only know she wants to get back to the planet because she's waiting for someone to come back for her. You know, we're assuming it's her family. I think it's pretty obvious she's waiting for someone to come back and claim her, so she feels like she belongs somewhere. And I think that's where Han and Leia come in, because, like you said, they lost their child. I'm guessing, I don't know, somewhere in his teenage years, probably. You know, so they had time with him. He got lost in the training and went to the dark side. And, you know, they see these things in Rey. You know, as I mean, you know, like, you know, when I hang out with you on the weekend, your mom was very maternal and motherly to me, and vice versa. You know, I mean, that's, you know, who Leia is. She's a caretaker as much as a leader, and I love that she's General Leia in this. That's a whole another topic, but I love what they did with her in this movie. But again, with the whole thing with Rey, like, I think that's a lot of us as the audience that put the importance of who she was, who her family is. But I think that was to more accentuate the loss for Han and Leia's characters, because that was the family story. Han and Leia and Kylo Ren, like, that's where all of that was. And, you know, somehow Rey coming into this is forced all of this with Luke and Kylo Ren and all that stuff. Like, you know,
bubble to the surface. Basically.
She's definitely, you know, a catalyst between her and Finn, the things they've done, and I think that's great. And I gotta say this, there's a lot of people I'm hearing out there complaining, whining, whatever word you want to use, that a woman and a black man are the focus characters of this movie. I have to say this. This is normally not like a big, I don't think we're going to get very political too often on this.
No.
But I think I speak.
But this is a time.
I think I can speak for you.
Yeah.
Those of you who are complaining about that, shut up.
There
it's
are worse things in this world. So many worse things in this world.
Seriously, get over it. I mean, Leia was as important as a character in the original trilogy. Padme was, you know, okay, Clone
Padme's
Wars.
sad a lot.
I know you haven't watched Clone Wars, but like Ahsoka in the Clone Wars series and the other Jedi, and so a lot of the other, there's a lot of really awesome female characters in that series. And, you know, this isn't political correct, whatever. I mean, this is just, come on, there's more women in this world than there are men. So, you know, the fact that the female character ends up with the lightsaber at the end of the movie and kicks Kylo Ren's butt, even though she's not fully trained and he was suffering a lot. Like, there's a whole lot of, you know, that's a whole, you know, a different part of the conversation. But and she's not overpowered. She's not a Mary Sue. She's not any of this stuff. Like, there's a lot of buildup for Rey that makes sense. And I have not been this excited about a character in the movies for a long time. So I cannot wait to see what journey they take her on. I think Finn is a fantastic new addition. I love that they've expanded the Stormtrooper base to where there's personalities. There's a couple of them that are clearly females besides Captain Phasma in the movie through the voice communicators you hear. You know, and that opening shot when one of FN 2187's comrades falls and he wipes the blood on his face and he kind of stumbles back where it's almost like getting knocked out of a trance kind of. I thought that was really powerful, and, you know, you don't see a lot of blood in the Star Wars movies, and just seeing that bright red smear on that white, bone white Stormtrooper armor was a very visceral, powerful image. And, you know, I think Finn was already going down that road, and that was just kind of that last thing. Like I said, go read Journey of the Force Awakens before The Awakening is a great book that would enhance your knowledge of the three main characters prior to the events of the movie.
Well, here's the thing. Like, the last movie that we did a serious review on, it's opposite of how this movie is for me. Like, I didn't realize it, but this is actually a good way of showing compare and contrast of a movie that's a huge, hyped-up movie and where it goes wrong, and a movie that actually does it well. Mm-hmm. Because I'm somebody that I don't have a huge amount of spare time, so investing in sitting down and reading novelizations and tie-ins and whatnot is usually not the way that I spend my time. I go to the movies and I see the movie just based on, well, the movie is going to tell me the story, and if the movie can't tell me the story, I get really upset for the fact that it should be all playing out in front of me in order for me to understand what the point of this thing was. In the case of our first review, Batman v Superman, it wasn't the fact that you needed to read things before the movie, it was the fact that Zack Snyder comes out with all of these things afterwards trying to explain to you what he did in the movie. That bothered me on so many levels for the fact that I don't want to read interviews to understand what happened in a movie. I don't want to have to know the cliff notes of what the director's notes were in the script to know what happened in the movie. And if
like with Captain Phasma, the armor, that's a cool bit of information, but it's not important.
Yeah, no, it's true. But in the case of Force Awakens, I didn't go in with reading any of the stuff leading up to this movie. And granted, there are probably one or two things that for me, I look at it as, so why is this way? Without having someone there to talk to about it or whatever. And it's been like knocking around in my head for a little bit since seeing the movie the first time. But watching it tonight, I just kind of went, you know what? Enough of my answers were up on the screen that if I don't know all the answers in this one, I'm not feeling like I'm at a disadvantage, really.
Yeah.
Like, I think the only thing that I still look at as, well, why, is how the power structure of the actual galaxy works. And the fact that, I know you've read stuff leading into this movie, so you've explained some of this to me, but it is a little weird to me that you did end up finding that the Empire got their butts kicked. And I know it wasn't the Endor battle in Jedi. I heard it happens after that. That was like one of the bigger blows to the Empire to lead to them.
Yeah.
But then the fact that, we had like 20 years or whatever it is, or 30 years now, I guess, in between Jedi and Force Awakens, and there's still a certain amount of, well, how is it that we have the Resistance and the New Order and how that all built up? So that in my head wasn't figured out going into this movie. And I just kind of threw my hands up and I said, okay, we have the Empire basically and we got the Rebellion again. Okay, but there is a certain amount of, so basically all that they did leading up to this movie from the previous movies, it's almost like, what? That didn't work. They're still out there, like you can't stop this thing. So in a way, there's a part of me that's a little like, well, I kind of was hoping that it would be a little different instead of playing the same old tune in a sense. But I see the differences already with the New Order to an extent versus the Resistance, I guess is now. So that to me was like, all right, fine, I'll give it that. But otherwise, besides the Rey mystery, everything is up there on the screen for me, and I never felt like I'm sitting there guessing.
Well, and some of it, just based on movie knowledge, what happens in the movie, like they mention the fact that there's a difference, or the Republic and the Resistance are two separate entities. Which, you're just going in and watching it the first time, not reading any of the extra. I can understand why that would be confusing. Because there's like, well, why is there two sets of good guys and the set of bad? Like, I can understand why that would be confusing. What they do say, when Hux is delivering his frightening Hitler-esque speech, I mean, that just gave me chills.
I was waiting for his head to pop off. He just looks so angry.
Donald Gleason just delivers such a fantastic performance as Hux. He's one of those bad guys that I just love to hate in this movie, and he does it so well. But when he's delivering the speech, he talks about destroying the resistance and the corrupt government that protects them in the Republic. So he's clearly sees them as two separate entities. We don't, even at this point with what I've read, I don't know why there are two separate entities, but the resistance is these fighters operating independent of the Republic. Because it seems to me kind of like the Republic is building into that kind of bureaucracy where we want to be at peace, we don't want to acknowledge there's stuff going on out there. That's the impression I'm getting from the few things I've read. But I don't think you need. I guess that could be a minor complaint, like that wasn't clear enough in the movie.
It's my minor complaint, and it's something that I know I've read online many places since the movie came out, and I just kind of was like, yeah, I can agree with that to an extent, because without reading movie tie-in 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever, there is a certain amount of, like, as a fan of the originals, and again, I'm a fan of the movies themselves. I haven't really dealt with tie-ins as much. So I'll put it out there. If it was revealed in an extended universe, anything, there's a good chance I don't know, because I think I read one extended universe novel as a kid. I read the original Star Wars novelization as a kid, and I think that's as far as I got. I never really tried, and I know there's good stuff out there. I know the Thrawn trilogy, everybody talks that up. I know that stuff's good, but I was talking to Jesse about this before we started filming. Like, my starting point and my ending point for the movies until the prequels hit, and then all of a sudden, the prequels. The prequels. Yeah. PTSD. It was derived from what is George Lucas doing in these movies, because if George Lucas started with Star Wars and this was his universe that he was trying to put out there, then for me it was, well, if he didn't have a hand in it one way or the other, then I'm not investing the time in it, because I didn't feel that it was then canon. So take that as you will of my opinion for the rest of this review. But Force Awakens for me was, to look at it this way, and I've explained it to a few people since seeing the theatrical release, but it's like I said, it has a lot of love for Star Wars in it and stuff. But I also had this, like, I kind of smiled a bit and stuff, and I said, this is what happens when Mom and Daddy get divorced. Like, what I mean by that is it felt like it was trying to make up for the fact that George Lucas wasn't doing this movie. Like, you had Lawrence Kasdan, which, great, he is also one of the key components in creating Empire. And, Empire being the movie that it is for most, original trilogy fans, he's one of those guys that, you got the powerhouse coming in to help out. But I felt still like in these movies, it's like J.J. Abrams had a handle on what was going on, and he wasn't doing like the reboot thing like Star Trek, what he did there. He was trying to open it up to different ideas, but there was a certain amount of, like, I felt like there was this spirit or this specter hanging over it, like George Lucas isn't around, like there was a certain amount of that going on for me, at least, and that's because I know the behind the scenes stuff, I guess. But it always felt a little weird to me. I'm watching the first Star Wars movie that he has no anything in, and the little he was wanting to put out there by having a script for the 7th one, and he gave it to Disney and all this stuff, from what I understand, and them going, we're gonna do this, you're gonna put yours here, we're gonna do this. So there's a part of me that's like, I kind of feel sad to an extent. Like this for me is like the end of an era in a whole new way, because we're backing away from, or we're not backing away, but we're distancing completely from the prequels. We're gonna turn it into what you loved about the originals, but the main component of the creation of this universe is no longer a factor in creating this movie, and so there's a part of me that is, it's a little sad on that level, because, like I said, if it wasn't in the movies when I was a kid, I didn't really worry about it, to be honest. So even the prequels, I wasn't a huge fan of the prequels. The midichlorian thing was complete and utter. Like I remember opening day.
Swearing at me.
Opening day of episode 1. The minute that they had Qui-Gon on the communicator with who was it? It was Mace
Obi-Wan.
Windu, I guess, or Obi-Wan, and there's he was talking to him about the M word, which that's funny that the M word, and then they asked Shmi about, well, who was his father? He had no father. I burst out laughing practically there because I'm like, oh, it's Space Jesus. Oh my God. So like he pretty much severed my ties from that feeling ever since that line and the damn midichlorian garbage, because it's far, like, I know there's so many people out there who hated that line, and I know it's been played up for years because we've had like what, 20 years now of people having distance from that movie and being able to make all the fun of it they want to.
17.
Almost. But it's just like, yeah, here we are with, you know, this ridiculousness. So from that point on, I'm like, okay, if it only ties into the original trilogy, this is all I'm dealing with then, because that was what made me happy. So the extended universe, even going into this one, it's a little like, I know this is canon, but I still felt sad in a way. Like that era of that creating of this universe is gone now, and now
I don't feel that way at all.
I don't have the opinion that Disney's ruining it. I don't, because if Disney is smart, they're gonna be like how they are with the Marvel movies and say, you guys do what works because it's working, and you know, keep going, do it, keep putting it out there and making your own spin on it. But there is a part of me that's just like, you know, okay, that era's gone and now we're moving forward. It felt good though. It didn't feel wrong. It just, there was that part of me where I'm like, I'm watching the first Star Wars movie that George Lucas has nothing to do with.
And I understand the sentiment in that. And normally I'm a really sentimental guy when it comes to a lot of stuff. I mean,
the prequels made you so not sentimental,
well,
I'm guessing.
I mean, come on. No offense to George Lucas, because I mean, without George Lucas, we would not be talking about this movie.
Yeah.
These movies would not exist. Like, I don't want to turn this into a bash George Lucas thing, because he created an incredible universe of characters and these ideas and everything, and
he reinvented the hero story basically for a new generation.
Yeah, you know, and there's all of that. There's so much good that came out of it. So I don't want to like bash George Lucas, but I felt, I mean, I love the original just Star Wars movie. Empire is my favorite from the original trilogy. It's just because I love the whole training thing with Yoda and like all this stuff, you know, with Luke, you know, finding out that Vader's his father and all this stuff. Like, that was like crazy awesome stuff. And, you know, ending on kind of a down note with, you know, my favorite character, joint favorite character getting, you know, taken away.
They're
and
all scattered like, to the wind, sort of, in a sense.
you know,
how are they gonna make this work?
Yeah,
They're at the lowest point of the heroes.
So your one part of the Star Wars Trinity is essentially missing at this point, and you know, how are they going to come back from that? And then how it picks up in the next movie. I know a lot of people complain about the Ewoks and all this, but I love the freaking Ewoks. I mean, granted, you know, but here's what I'm coming back to. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are burdened with, what's that thing? You know, what's that quote about artists? Like, a painting is never done; it's just abandoned, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm like, at some point, like, if you have a cut, an extended cut or something, maybe put that out. But don't come back 20 years later,
special editions,
and you know, add all this new stuff in. And I'm not even getting into the who shot first thing, and the fact that George Lucas wears a T-shirt that has Han Solo saying Han shot first. Just really messes with my brain.
It's too meta.
But just, you know, it's kind of like you create something and you keep tinkering with it and you keep twisting it and you keep doing this. Next thing you know, like I draw. I'm an artist-ish. And, you know, I've done stuff and I've drawn things, and then, you know, you keep working on it. Before you know it, you've ruined it, and you got to start, like, you know, with a picture you can at least start over. And no one has to see the original thing. But once it's out there for everyone to see, you know, certain things like taking all the guns away from the guys in
the
ET,
federal marshals or whatever, yeah.
You know, or having Greedo shoot first, or just different things. It's just kind of like, stop. It's done. You already put it out there. If you want to enhance some of the CG backgrounds, like the stuff in Bespin in Empire was, enhancing the backgrounds there, I was fine with that. Because that doesn't change the story.
Yeah.
But like, Lucas, in a way, kind of was his own worst enemy.
Yeah,
with these
I'll
movies.
give you
Again,
that.
not to say that he didn't create this amazing stuff, but like he, and I can say that on some level because I know what that's like because I do that with my own stuff.
Yeah.
I'll tinker with it and mess with it, and and I haven't put anything out there, so I really have put one thing out there so far. But anyway,
you at least did it. Though. That's the thing.
But and I wasn't so precious with that. It's so all that to say. On some levels, yeah, it is sad to be going forward without Lucas, behind the thing. But he didn't direct Empire or Jedi.
Yeah, he didn't direct.
He was definitely involved with it, but he was heavily involved with the prequels, and that
it ruined it. And I mean, okay, I guess
that I'm just saying this for me. I'm not trying to convince you.
No. Oh, no, I don't feel like that. But it's just I'm owned to the fact that at least the guy who started it all is some way attached to it. I guess.
Yeah.
But the fact that you did prove a good point. The fact that he couldn't stop messing with something, and I think in the interview that you and I talked about, where he talked with Charlie Rose, it was the idea that he wouldn't be able to not mess that up, like for the new ones going forward, because he would be throwing opinions out there that were going to probably piss people off after a while, because he was going to be the one pushing against all of the people trying to get this to work.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's like all these other people helped build this elaborate, house of cards, and then he's like, "Ooh, I want to put this one on here," and they're like, "George, no, it's good.
Yeah.
No, but look, we all did this," and he's like, this one has to go here. And no, don't touch it."
And on top of that, just the prequel trilogy kind of proved that, like he might want to see the movies done in certain ways, but he works better as someone who would do like the producing role now more than he would have been directing or obviously the writing was he should have never let himself write those movies.
I know a lot of people are probably going to hate me for what I'm about to say. Stan Lee gave us a lot of amazing comic book characters.
Mm-hmm.
I do not read many Stan Lee comics that he wrote because of its well thought out dialogue.
Yeah, and it's
X-Men
true.
are some of my favorite comic book characters of all time, and some of the best writing I've seen from X-Men came from Chris Claremont, where Stan Lee was not involved.
Yeah, and no.
So
that makes sense.
I'm hammering a point. I think that I don't need to anymore.
And in some ways, having other input into something is the best way to make it better. And I get that. Again, it was more the nostalgia factor, I guess, for me, where it's like, oh, George Lucas, because like it's even weird to open the movie, for me at least, and you see just Lucasfilm quietly there, and then it goes right into the movie. Whereas, it's like the traditionalist in me is like, I want to hear the fanfare, the 20th Century Fox. I want all the bells and whistles that I grew up with. And now that we don't have those things, it's like this is the movie. As this is a horrible comparison, but I have to make it in a way. Superman Returns, all right? We're really going off the book here. Superman Returns broke the cycle for me of, okay, everything that you expected from a Superman movie, they did it finally in that movie, and it proved why it doesn't work to do it this way anymore. And you need to go forward in a different direction, even though I'm not thrilled with a new direction, but it's a new direction. And in the case of this, it's like, you can't recapture all this stuff from your childhood and keep bringing it forward, kicking and screaming. You gotta, times change, life moves on, things go forward, and that's all there is to it. So, and I can divorce myself with that feeling, but because this is the first one they did this with, me going into it, I'm like, yeah, I could feel the feeling that, Lucas there's like the specter of Lucas over the movie for a certain extent.
I'm picturing that scene from Fanboys when Kristen Bell's character is like, I can hear his beard through the.
Yeah. It's I can hear his beard while he's.
There's no beard in the credits on this one.
There's no beard. No beard.
There's beard here.
But yes, there is beard here.
And plaid. So there you go. There's all the Lucas you need. Can you edit that part out? That was awful.
I'm keeping that in. That was great. But yeah, okay. So that being a very minor criticism from me, I'm trying not to make it into a horrible thing or whatever. But the whole thing that you talked about with the female protagonist, and you have a black person or African. He's English, so he can't even go with African American technically on that. So black,
whatever the proper terminology.
Whatever. Put it in the comments, whatever, or just tell us we're jerks, whatever. But I like the fact that there's diversity. I did, and to be honest, I mean, I don't know how much going forward that J.J. Abrams his touch on these is going to keep going. I don't know if he's an executive producer or something on the next ones or not, but I think in a way, like, he's tried and true at this point. His track record is pretty sound. He's had maybe one or two things here or there that didn't hit quite the way that people were expecting, but I mean, Mission Impossible 3 and Star Trek and whatnot, and then you have the shakier ones, Star Trek Into Darkness and Super 8 for me was a little shakier because I didn't feel the same like J.J. Abrams-ishness to wow me. But the thing is,
I was wowed.
I know you were.
I was.
I know you were. the minute that you see J.J. Abrams' name on this, it's like, well, yeah, it's going to be a girl. Of course. I mean, have you not seen Alias? Have you not seen Felicity and things like that? I mean, not to compare this to those, but he's a pro-women sort of a creator in that way. And so, the people who are having a fit about this, it's like, well, look at the person who's doing these things. And the fact that he's putting his thoughts into it now, it's like, well, part of the thing about the originals and the last trilogy even is you have a director and a writer, or at least the creatives that they had on there, who they're going back to the stuff that they knew growing up, and a lot of that was very male centric and whatnot. They were very Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and these characters that they were emulating in Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and whatnot. Why are you laughing?
It would take too long to explain.
I always did. Well, oh, no, sorry. I thought you meant I'm taking too long to explain.
It's Star Wars related. There's another great, group of people out on YouTube called the Oral Knots, and they re-edited.
Oh, okay.
And you're talking about all the guys, and all I can hear in my mind is say sausage one more time.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's the nature of their influences were male centric because it was very much the boys go to the Saturday morning serial matinee the movies back in those days, and I can't say for sure, but most of the characters of that era were male centric because it was playing the boy fantasy of, well, when you grow up, you could be Flash Gordon, saving the universe, or Roy Rogers, or the Lone Ranger, or Zorro, or I mean, they did Superman serials and whatnot.
Well, and that's I'm gonna cut in again.
Sure.
That's one of the things I love about Star Wars and what Luke Skywalker, the actor who played Mark Hamill said about Luke, because a lot of people are questioning Luke's sexuality.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you want him to be this, he's that. See yourself in these characters, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, okay, Rey she's crazy independent, lives on her own, takes care of herself. She's scavenging, she's making, she's barely making it, but she's doing it. Mm-hmm. And then she stumbles into this bigger world, and she kicks ass.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're boy, girl, whatever. Like, those are all great qualities to live up to and to aspire to. And, and if, a young girl's watching the original Star Wars movies, let her dress up as Luke Skywalker. And it doesn't have to be one thing or another. I mean, yes, they are in the movie, but, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about heroes and these types of movies, like these fantasies and these epics, is like, it's like you identify with the qualities and the characters. I was like, I'm never going to be a 7.5 foot tall hairy Wookiee.
Yeah.
But the loyalty and the ferocity and all those things that Chewbacca is, I mean, granted, I'm not going to go rip your arms off if you beat me in a game, because A, I'm not that dedicated to playing games, and B, it would probably take me a while, and
Well,
and it's illegal or something.
A couple years back, I started following this this one specific post on Facebook called "Portrait of an Adoption," and the mother on there would post things about her daughter and growing up with a child who's adopted and trying to find their way and all that. And the reason that I started following her was there was a story that she's a huge Star Wars fan, but she was getting constantly bullied because the boys at her school were like, Star Wars isn't for girls. So, like, going into this movie, I actually was smiling a little bit, thinking to myself, now she can prove them wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that Rey is one of those characters, like, is she overpowered? Some people might say yes. In my opinion, rewatching it tonight, it didn't bother me. Like, I guess the first time I watched it, I'm like, yeah, I could see why people are not thrilled about this and the whole Mary Sue thing or whatever. Like, just judging it on a first initial reaction, it's like, there is a little bit too convenient things about this. But then watching it tonight, I'm like, no, like, the moment where she tries the Force, or the Jedi mind trick, that was... I looked at it from one or two points of view. Either she's a fangirl about the Jedis, because when she you knew who Luke Skywalker was, and she has that air about it where she heard these stories. And granted, there's probably a connection to maybe her and her family to Luke, possibly. There's almost like an implication of that.
Well, even we can bring that simpler. The first time any of us saw Star Wars, not even existing in the world where we know the Force exists, how many of us did not try to reach across our school desk and pull the pencil to our hand with the Force?
Or how many times in your life have you done these aren't the droids you're looking for, or I mean,
they're almost 37. Almost every time I walk into a store with sliding glass doors, I wave my hands at them. And then when I saw one to Target a couple months ago and they had the sticker on there like "Open the doors, use me for," I'm like, oh.
What, you didn't want to do it anymore?
I didn't want to do it anymore.
It ruined it for you.
It's like, this is my imagination. This is my playtime.
You took this from me.
Corporatizing. Corporatizing. I'm sticking with that word.
Well,
but I mean, so of course that makes sense that Rey would try it. And she fails the first two times she tries it.
She does. And I looked at it from, either the moment with Kylo Ren, like, awakens some of that in her, maybe, like, because she's pushing back in that scene. So I think she's starting to realize I have an ability with this. So her trying it out in the scene after that made a little bit of sense and stuff. But, the whole, she hears the screaming and she goes through the Maz Kanata cantina scene and all that and finds the lightsaber and has all those flashes. It's like, well, that's the moment it happens anyway. So the fact that she's able to access something, and maybe she knows tales of this, or she... she, like I said, she might be a geek about it or something, because she does light up a bit when Han Solo's talking about knowing Luke Skywalker. Yeah. So to me, it's like,
well, even when
it's
Finn
already
mentions
there,
what the map is, he's like, it's like a map that leads to Luke Skywalker. She's like, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
I thought it was a myth. Like, it's there. So it's like, and she lives alone. It's not like she's going out to hang out with her friends on the weekends.
Going to Tasha Station
to
get power.
There's not a whole teenage culture going on Jakku.
She's hanging out with an old lady scrubbing parts. I mean, it's not like she's got like
snapjaw, metal-faced aliens that are probably telling her off for hogging up the cleans, whatever. I mean, it's a different world. Like, again, I'm trying to not read any of the information from the books into this.
I'm just judging it based on the movie.
I'm just trying to go based off.
That's all I got right now.
Okay, she clearly has an affinity for the rebellion. She's got the little doll.
Yeah, and she's got the helmet, which I love.
There's all
that
these
moment.
things. There's all these things. So she knows how to pilot. She knows about Han and the rebellion. She knows that Han was a smuggler. Like, that's what she reacts to more than him being a war hero. So that's one thing that I found interesting when I was watching it a couple weeks ago. Finn calls Han Solo a war hero.
Mm-hmm.
He's only flipped sides for like 7 hours at this point.
Yeah.
And he's calling Han a war hero. And
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of interesting. Either he, and maybe I'm probably overlooking it, but like to him, wouldn't have Han been the enemy?
Well, I think he'd be the enemy only leading up to him realizing what really was going on, and he didn't like it. And then now everybody he heard was evil. Now he's like, well, that's a hero to him now, and it's like that. That didn't really bother me in that way.
Because
this moment where he snapped out of it, I'm like,
yeah.
That makes sense. That then everybody he's heard negatively in the Empire or the First Orders talking about them or how they put them out there to these kids that they're brainwashing to become stormtroopers. It's like, yeah, that makes sense that he flips the script in that way at least. So, but yeah, I mean, all this stuff like getting back to Rey at least for a little bit here, but all that stuff to me, like, looking at it now, I'm like, it doesn't really bother me as much. And I mean, it's not even like storytelling issues or whatever. To me, it's like, it's the J.J. Abrams-ism of it. It's like, J.J. always loves doing these mysteries. And J.J. always likes having these little things that make you curious going into the next thing or whatever. So in that way, it's like, it's like, well, now he left his mark on Star Wars, just like other people have left their marks. And it's the new version of storytelling because, obviously when the first trilogy was made, they didn't realize that they would be able to make not just one but two sequels. Mm-hmm. So, this one, it's guaranteed that they're going to have two more after this. Yeah. So they can do something they couldn't do with the other ones and stuff. There was a certain amount of, like, when I first saw it, my initial reaction was, this is ADD Star Wars. Because I felt like the scenes moved so between one to another so quickly that I was a little like, boy, give me a moment. Like, give me a chance to breathe. Tonight, I didn't feel that way either. I was either I knew going in, I'm going to just watch it and based on that, or I just, it just clicked better for me, I guess, or something. I'm not 100% sure.
It is a very fast-paced movie. I mean, the editing, there are a couple, like, it's definitely a movie that feels like it picks up and it just keeps clicking, it just gets builds and builds and builds. Like, it's definitely a fast-edited, fast-paced movie. And it makes the 2 hour and 16-minute runtime, in my opinion, it makes it fly by as opposed to, that movie we keep talking about last time that seemed twice as long almost.
Well, each thing added to it. That's the thing, too. Yeah. Like, there wasn't really, they didn't really have much filler. And the little moments that they had between characters weren't something where it was just padded to give you a moment. It was actually, this is the characters with this moment.
And, I think they gave you enough for the story and enough to take. And, like you said, there's going to be more to the story to come. So I think we are going to see payoff to some of the build-up in this movie in what will be Episode 8. You know, the very fact that they're starting off, the way I understand it is they're starting off at the same exact moment this one ends, which is a bit of a odd thing to me because it always starts with the space shot. So I'm sure they'll incorporate that somehow, but to come right back to an exact moment, like every other Star Wars movie, there's been at least what feels like a couple of months to a couple of years in between episodes. Hopefully Empire to Jedi didn't take the characters 3 years to free Han, but well, and that's one of the things I like about the J.J. Abrams stuff is some of his stuff I like that they leave a mystery and they don't explain. Because I feel like, a lot of the answers they gave on Lost, I enjoyed. But I know a lot of people were not happy with the answers they were given. And they didn't get answers to other things that I think weren't important, but they got built up into big mysteries in the fan base.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, that's a whole different thing. But with this...
I don't blame him for that, though, because he was only like a cog in the wheel of how that thing worked
But at the same time, it's like... come on. It's like... mystery is part of the intrigue, of life. Knowing everything is boring because then there's nothing left to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, I'm not saying I would like to know more about the Knights of Ren, who those other guys were.
Yeah.
You know, beyond what I've seen in the production artwork and everything. And I want to know in the story what they are, how they play into things. Are they going to come back, and are they going to be a bigger threat going forward? Because that's another thing I think a lot of people I've heard complain about, like, oh, you know, when Kylo Ren takes off the helmet, you know, he's not this kind of bad guy.
He's an emo musician-looking dude, or whatever they say. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought he looked great, and I thought the performance he gave was great because he's like when he has his moments where he's having his little fits.
Those are great.
Like that's him losing control, and I think the rest of the time he is trying to project such a non-emotional being. So when he takes his helmet off and he's not giving you emotions, I think that's a very conscious, intentional choice between the writer or the director and the actor to play it that way. And his acting, I think when he's on that catwalk with Han or the bridge and the reactor or whatever, and or the oscillator, there's these little twitches. And when he's giving that speech to Vader's helmet, the little twitches at the helmet. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can't imagine it's easy acting with that thing on. But, like, you get the turmoil he's going with. Yeah. You know, he's like, I'm being called to the light, you know, like... And that's the thing that you get. Rey is, like, where Luke is at the beginning of A New Hope when he goes off with Obi-Wan to start learning about us. At the end of this movie, that's where she is. Kylo Ren is kind of somewhere between Empire and Jedi level of where Luke was. Like, he's still becoming the villain. He's not the fully rounded, fully trained bad guy yet. And I like that. I like that he is not the full, formidable potential bad guy that he gets to be. And I'm curious to see where they go with that.
Yeah.
You know, like, but he's still really powerful and intimidating. Like, he stops a blaster bolt in midair.
That's awesome. That moment was great.
He pulls actual thoughts out of people's minds, which in everything I've ever read or whatever with the Star Wars universe, like, that's not possible. Like, you can get what they're feeling. You know, with Darth Vader and the Emperor,
your feelings betray
hints,
you.
You know, they get hints and things, and Vader is able to piece it together, but, like, not it's in a droid, a BB-8 unit. It's here, you know, like he's extracting specific things of information out, which, as far as I remember, we've not seen that before on that scale. And he's doing a lot of stuff we haven't seen, but he also has a lot of lack of control with stuff.
I like that though,
and I think that's interesting. Yeah. And I think this is a villain on his own arc. It's not just fully formed badass Darth Maul who gets cut in half, and you know, and that's I will say this. Whatever the deal with Snoke is, I'm hoping for a really cool story and explanation, because I'm really tired of Star Wars villains who are defective. Like, okay, Darth Vader, he's more man than machine. Like, that's this haunting tale. But then Darth Maul, you know, gets cut in half. You know, and it's like, okay, he's gone. And then in what is it? Attack of the Clones.
You have Dooku.
You've got Dooku. I mean, he's old dude.
Yeah, so his age basically is his weakness in a sense.
And you know, there's all that, and then you get to what's his name? General Grievous in Revenge of the Sith, and you know, he's, you know, basically
he needed a cough drop.
He's RoboCop. I mean, he's a head and a heart in this robot body. And it's like, you know, and he's got this breathing problem. And then, you know, Darth Vader, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, why does the Emperor keep these fragile, dying people alive in these things?
Well, they can't rebel against him then. And it's just like, they need him and he needs them. And that's the whole, you know, the apprentice and the master and whatnot. And
if they would have written that like intentionally into the story that way, they would have. But Grievous wasn't a Sith. He wasn't his apprentice. He, you know, It's like all that. So like whatever this is with Snoke, he's got a breathing problem. He's got massive scars. He clearly can't stand or sit straight.
His face isn't like.
It's like horribly deformed.
It looks like there's like a part of it's like his cheeks gone.
And
or
it's
something.
like, you know, I love a well designed, you know, creepy looking bad guy, but. You know, hopefully Kylo Ren gets to live up to the potential that Darth Maul could have been had he not been cut in half in the first movie. And then they bring him back, and he's crazy, and he's got this spider body, and then they fix his legs in the Clone Wars and all this stuff. So, I mean, eventually they bring him back, basically all but, like, magically healing him. But, you know, it's like, let's have some...
No, I get where you're coming from, and I can understand your frustration with that, but I actually...
That's a minor complaint.
I'd have to be devil's advocate with you on that, only because I look at the whole thing of, like, Vader and even the Emperor to an extent, and Darth Maul and whatever. These are characters who they're lusting for power. They're lusting for this or that, and they're also using the negatives in order to accomplish their goals. Like, they're using fear, anger, hatred, and all that stuff, and deception. And it's almost it's informed by the way, like, it's a morality tale of, when you look at Vader, you look at, he was someone who lusted for power. He got what he wanted, but this is the cost that it came with.
No, yeah.
And in that way, I don't ever mind that, because that's interesting to me that you see, you know, like, there's always, I get where you're coming from to an extent of, you always see, here are these good-looking characters, and these are the good guys. I mean, the first one that always comes to my mind is the He-Man Masters of the Universe. I mean, you have He-Man, the bodybuilder, and he's, you know, blonde, and he's a good-looking guy. And you have Skeletor, who's basically like, you know, skeleton with, you know, the skull, and he looks like death or whatever. So in that way, but it's a way of doing the morality tales in these movies and whatnot to an extent. And I like that there's that element of, you know, be careful what you wish for, because the price is pretty great. So in that way, but in the new movies, actually, there's less of that in these. Like Kylo Ren only got served in this movie where he fought Rey at the end.
No.
And so now he's a wounded individual. He also got shot by Chewie, which was one of the most awesome moments for me,
and
too.
He took that shot.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't, like...
He didn't try to even use the Force to blind... But, I mean,
the crossbow or the bowcaster through the whole movie, every time Han or Chewie uses it, like, even in the scenes, like, right before Kylo Ren gets hit, you see
blowing
Chewie,
people up.
You see that stormtrooper, he's just patrolling down the hallway. And then you see Chewie in the door open, and he shoots him. And that guy goes flying like 5 feet across the hallway.
He's like shooting people half a football field away at that point. You know, like
it's like a
the power of that.
You know, and then, you know, I saw this great comic online, not canon or whatever, but it, you know, made me think. It's like, okay, Chewie's always with Han, so he would have been around young Ben. So
I've seen
his
that.
best friend.
I've seen that comic, and that was one of those.
You know, like, that's one of those things that kind of it gets you in the feels, man.
It does, and it makes it interesting to me, because it's like, this isn't like Darth Vader, where it's revealed that this character has ties to the protagonist in the second out of 3 movies.
Yeah,
this is one where Leia's invested in the fact that this, you know, Kylo Ren is out there. This is her son, and he's doing stuff that's counter everything she wants. It's actually, it reminds me a little bit of a petulant teenager. The teenager is going to rebel against the parents and do whatever it is, even if they're not. Maybe his heart isn't into it, because obviously the light is coming in. It's the whole issue of, you know, I need help because I want to feel the darkness. I don't want to feel the light and all that stuff. So it's like there is that tug and all that, and that's an interesting course for the character to go on in the next 2 movies. But, you know, it's also interesting to me where it's already brought out that, okay, Leia's the mother. You know what's going on there. Han's the dad. Han actually, from what, you know, I mean, obviously he's offed in this movie, but will he stay offed? I heard issues about that too. There might be more in the next movie with him somehow, a flashback, something. I don't know. But for now, he's, you know, he's not a participant the way I view it. And Chewie, like, I didn't really even think of that until that cartoon you were talking about. And yeah, when I saw it, I'm like, he reacted out of anger and rage, But the poor guy has to be hurting because that was his family. You know,
Yeah,
that was
not a kill shot.
They didn't even,
whether intentional or accidental.
And I guess I'm actually kind of bummed out that they didn't really touch on that at the end of this movie, because they focused more on Rey and they focused more on the new characters. And I'm not even saying, oh, Leia should have had the hug with him or something, but there's a certain amount of like, what's he going through? You know, and he's not even like it's very much New Hope, because at the end he had a hand to play at the end of that movie, and he didn't even get a medal, and he just gets to say the last line of the movie, and that's about the extent of it.
Well, but, I mean, and he gets to say the last line in this movie. It might have been the same thing.
So I mean, there are definitely nods.
Where's my medal? Damn it!
Maybe that's all he keeps saying throughout the movie. He's like, "You got a medal, jerk," you know. Like,
yeah, and I don't know.
Kylo is a way more interesting character. This is the character that Anakin should have been, and I think that's the only nod to the prequels are trying to go with, is Kylo Ren is what Anakin should have been if it was written better.
Yeah.
In the prequels, and this is their chance to fix that, and this is their chance to have an interesting antagonist for Rey going forward. And I guess there's a part of me that's like, I like it when there is the Vader Luke thing, where Vader is so advanced, he's decades ahead of where Luke would be, and the only weakness to Vader is the fact that he is he's mostly cyborg at that point. If he wasn't cyborg, he'd probably be a hell of a force to be reckoned with, worse than he already was. And in this case, it's like now you have two people who they're on the same track to become, you know, better at what they're doing, but it's kind of weird that, you know, Kylo Ren isn't where he should be with the dark side yet. He still has training to complete. Same with Rey. But in this one, going forward, I think it's going to be interesting because you might actually get to see how the dark side trains people.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that plays out, too, in
that's what I like.
The new movies.
Every villain you got in the previous, in the trilogies, both of the previous trilogies, you know, Darth Vader was a fully formed bad guy at that point. There was no more training for him. Darth Maul was, he was the apprentice because, you know, until he kills the master, there was nowhere else for him to go. So he was fully formed. Count Dooku was fully formed. General Grievous was fully formed. You know, like
those guys were basically just like, you know, quick post-it note characters. They didn't really put anything more than, well, he's the new bad guy into it, and that's about it. Yeah. So,
and you know, I think, and I know I've said this before, that the Clone Wars animated series does a lot of justice in making me appreciate the prequels more, because they flesh out Anakin a lot more. It makes him a more interesting character. The journey he goes on, especially, you know, training his own Padawan and everything.
We should get into the Star Wars thing at some point on another video and just really get into the mythology and what it. Yeah. I mean that because I know this is taking up a lot of what we're trying to talk about for this one tonight.
Well, I'm going to jump back to the Force Awakens.
Let's go back to Force Awakens
because I know things for me going into it. I had high expectations. All of them were met. I had a blast watching this movie. I felt like a kid in like the best possible way possible. The best possible way possible? In all the best ways. I mean, it was just, it was fun. Negative. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was exciting. It was, you know, dramatic. It was, you know, scary and ominous and all these things. And at the end, I left and I'm like, yes. You know, even though, you know, Han dies this tragic death. I mean, it wasn't a throwaway death. Like, it had meaning for the story. You know, because it's progressed, you know, it was a step in as much Luke needed to confront Vader for his training. Kylo Ren had to confront his father for his training. You know, unfortunately, he's training for the wrong side. But, you know, there's all that. And just the music and the effects and all the things like taking off out of the hangar in hyperspace, you know, disintegrating that Rathtar on the windshield of the Millennium Falcon.
That was great.
All the stuff with Chewie and Finn in the cargo bay, you know, where, you know, he's trying to patch him up and it's just it was so funny, and just, it was everything I could have wanted out of a well-told Star Wars movie. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, it didn't feel Star Wars enough for me. And then there's other people who are like, oh, it felt too much like the prequels. You know, they just copy, or the original trilogy, you know, the desert planet, and they copy this and the Death Star and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, there's a lot of skeleton structure that is similar.
Yeah.
But most of those things are not the point of the movie. It's like, it's kind of like, I don't know, they're hanging a new story on a familiar backdrop to tell the bigger story, but you're focusing on the locations rather than what's actually happening. You know, well, because the whole point of, like, destroying Starkiller Base wasn't the point of the movie.
No, that was the backdrop to the emotional.
You know, once they realized, you know, like, you know, the point of that end attack was for Finn to get Rey. Like, there was this whole deception where he lied to them, saying, he's like, well, you know, if we figured out, and, you know, that great moment, he's like, oh, we'll use the Force. And I was like, that's not how the Force works.
I like that.
That is a great path, because, you know, like, in the other movies, you know, everybody's, like, very clear and honest about what's going on. You know, in this, he's like, I got to save her. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't care about the rest of the galaxy. I'm here to save Rey.
Yeah. And
the great thing is, she was in the middle of saving herself, right? Not to get on that whole, you know, thing, but I just love that. And every time, and that was like Finn's through story through the whole movie. When they get attacked in Nema Outpost at the beginning by the TIE fighters, he's sprawled out on his back. She's picking him up, and he's like coming to, and he's like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah.
He's
the one on his back.
Yeah.
You know, I love that interplay with the two of them, whether they lead them into a romantic pairing, or just hopefully they just become really good friends, and we can leave some sort of love triangle out of this trilogy, would be fantastic. Or maybe they do something else with other characters. Who knows? I know there's a big fan base for a certain
rebel
brotastic team, which I would be totally awesome, because those guys are great. But whatever.
Yeah.
Again, if they leave the love story out of it, I think you still have a great dramatic Star Wars story. Mm-hmm. You don't need that. Like, the love story with Han and Leia in the original trilogy wasn't one of the big beats, and I think that's, again, another thing that the prequel sacrificed for the story was the love story that never quite worked.
The thing is, like, the thing about, like, the romance in the originals and in the prequels, for me at least, it wasn't an issue of it was a romance as much as it's like love in the time of war. It's a little like you have these two people who are in a foxhole together. Yeah. And there's a certain amount of, like, I wouldn't look at you this way in any other situation. Well, like, but in this moment, the heightened, you know, the emotions and whatnot, and that's kind of like Han would do that because he's a scoundrel.
Yeah.
Leia wouldn't do that unless that moment presented itself in the way it did in Empire. And, you know, like, I enjoyed that, and it made it more weighty for a lot of other things going forward in the rest of the original trilogy, like, you know, her doing the I love you and I know, and I mean, that it was like she's losing the man she loves, and then the whole they're having to get him back, and she's the one going into Jabba's palace as
that
boss.
Was never, you know, she was going in to save him, but she wasn't the only one. It wasn't just
they had everybody.
It wasn't just about the love story, like. Whereas the prequel trilogy, you know, focused so much on that borderline forced Anakin Padme story that never quite connected for me. But in these new ones, you know, if they work one in, you know, I hope they do it more Han and Leia style. Yeah. Like the whole thing where they're trapped in the space slug, and, you know, they're fixing the Falcon and all this stuff, and the stuff where, you know, Lando's trying to, you know, steal her away in Cloud City, like all that. Like, that was great interplay with these characters, and, you know, calling her, you know, we don't have time to discuss this in a committee, and, you know, your highnessness and all that stuff. It was just great fun, where it was, you know, and I love the beats where we're getting similar feels, maybe not necessarily in romance, but like interplay between the characters in Force Awakens, and you know. And then the thing I like about this one is, like, I love that they made reference to a lot of visual cues to the original trilogy. You know, the desert planet, like, it immediately brings things into perspective from this existing universe. You know, you get the child, you know, that's grown up on the desert planet that doesn't feel like quite like they belong and all this stuff. Like, there's a lot of these echoing refrains, and, you know, that's good, but they compacted all three of those movies into one movie, so I have a feeling that most of what we're going to get in the next movie is going to be forward, is going to be very new, different material.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
I hope so.
You know, I think that's part of why we had kind of that almost breakneck speed going through this movie, which I'm not complaining about. But you've got the run on the Death Star, you've got the fight in the jungle a little bit with Tokanda, and Tokanda with, you know, at Maz Kanata's castle. Stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got the Force, you've got the sand, you've got the snow, you've got all these different things that are hearkening back to the original trilogy and getting you caught up with who these characters are, instead of having to spend so much more time. They're using visual cues and things to like build these characters up to a point where they can get on with new story.
Yeah.
And I know some people would complain, like, oh, why did you have to do it? Couldn't you have done it differently? Maybe, but I liked it.
Well,
because they're at least using references in their own universe and not like, we keep going back to this, not like Batman v Superman, where you have to know stuff from outside of the movies for it to make sense.
It makes sense that we keep referencing.
I don't want to keep referencing it.
I never would have thought that these two movies could be compared to each other, but it actually, there are things about the way that this one is handled where you can point to it with the other one. Also, and compare and contrast very well.
If you've never seen the original trilogy, and this is the first one you see, they give you enough information, I think, that you know who these characters are. And if you've never seen A New Hope or Empire or Return of the Jedi, this is all new, fresh material. And there's a lot of kids who are growing up today that maybe have never seen those ones yet, and this is the first movie their parents took them to.
That's the thing. Like, for me, I was one of the people, I think, at first, after seeing it, to go like, well, this is... They have the desert planet, they have a winter planet, they have the woods or the forest planet. So we're and granted, the winter and the woods are the same planet in that movie, but... You know, you're having all of your nods to the original trilogy, and you're kind of summing up three different movies all within one movie. But then I looked at it and I'm like, but look who's in charge of it. It's J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams, I think, has now got a certain amount of clout where he is, I don't want to call him the remake guru, but he's somebody who, at this point in his career, the way he handled Star Trek showed that he would be a good person to kind of like reboot or reinvent a mythology or a franchise and give you enough of what you loved about it in a taste of things, but say, that's what you're getting, but we're going to move forward in our new direction or whatever. And so in that way, I just looked at it as, well, this is kind of what it would be like to have a J.J. Abrams Star Wars no matter what, because he doesn't want to make the fans feel like they're so alienated in this movie going forward, I think. Yeah. And, you know, like I said, watching it the first time, I had a little bit of an issue with that, because as much as I wasn't a huge fan of how Lucas took things, there was a certain amount of... He did try to do something new, at least, with some of the movies. Like, the prequels weren't brilliant in any way, but there was something about, okay, Naboo was a different place than the place where the clones were, and that facility and whatnot. But you know, you could also look at those movies and go, well, there was new stuff, but where was the content? Yeah. Where was the heart? Yeah. Abrams is someone who can inject the emotion and the heart into these movies and make you care about these characters.
Yeah,
and that's
like, so many people complain about the prequels not feeling enough like the original trilogy. And now people are complaining that this new movie feels too much like the new trilogy. But I'm just like, okay, look, you got major differences. You got, first of all, Rey. Yeah, she's grown up on a desert planet, but her story arc is completely different from Luke's because, you know, she's on her own. You know, she's, you know, all this stuff. She doesn't want to leave. She gets dragged into this story. You know, Luke wanted to go. he's the one who started. He's like he excited about learning to be a Jedi and all this stuff.
Well,
Rey doesn't want to have anything to do with this. She wants to, and by the end of the movie, she kind of, and even when she's standing there giving the lightsaber to Luke, I don't really think it's her saying, I want to be trained. I think it's her saying, take this burden from me and let me go back to my life.
Yeah, I want to stay and wait for my parents back on Jakku, basically.
And, obviously I think she knows that's not going to be what she gets.
Yeah.
And, that's going to complicate, or, make things more complex and interesting going forward. Mm-hmm. And then you have, and to me, she feels more like the Han Solo character of these new characters. Finn, to me, feels more like Luke. He's the one who's trying to get away from the life he's known. And, he's got this different perspective and, he wants to get out. And again, granted, it's a different world he's escaping from. But he's the one trying to get away. He's like, no, I don't want to go back. I want to go away,
Yeah.
And then you got Finn, who feels very much like the Princess Leia. He's got the duty and the responsibility to the Resistance, and and Leia was like that in the originals to, the Old Republic and the Rebel Alliance and everything. Mm-hmm. So you've got, and then they also have little pieces of all the other ones, but that's kind of how I take those characters. Whereas Rey, she stays because she sees it's the right thing to do to help. BB-8 complete the mission, and Finn's the one that wants to run off. Then later, so there's little elements mixed around, but
it's you have different versions of the hero in all three of those characters. You have the reluctant hero in Rey, you have the wannabe hero in Finn, and you have the hero basically in Poe. I mean, Poe,
the duty bound.
Yeah, Poe is the most heroic, really, at moments because he's the one that's like the old movie serial version of the hero in my mind.
Yeah.
He's the one that...
Come on, that scene on Takanda when the Resistance comes after Maz Kanata's castle is destroyed, and you get that one pan shot of Finn on the ground watching that black X-Wing.
And that's the best pilot.
And he's taking out...
Is that part? Yeah.
You've watched him fly through. He takes out 8 TIE fighters, I think, and then 3 ground troops without missing a beat, and I think that's incredible. Just like, okay, we get to see, okay, here, like you were just saying, like the old serials and stuff. He's like the dog fight.
Yeah, he's the dog fighter.
He's like that kind of kind of almost World War I, World War II kind of hero. Standing there with like his hands on his hips with the blonde hair and the scarf flying.
Yeah, he would be
that dashing.
He would be like the Errol Flynn character.
He's not doing it to be a hero.
Yeah.
But because I think he seems like the most grounded character. Like,
yeah,
when he sees Finn at the base, when they first reconnect after Finn thought he was dead and everything, and he's like, "Oh no, you completed my mission. This is great." And the fact that he's like, FN2, he's like, no, I'm giving you a name. You're a person.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they. I don't know if you knew this or not yet, but on the bonus features on the DVD, they explained that Poe was supposed to die in the crash.
I heard about that.
He was supposed to die,
yeah.
But Oscar Isaac argued and begged that they would keep him alive because he didn't want to die. So
that's impressive.
And I'm really glad they did because I think what he adds to the second half of that film, leading the X-wing attack and everything, and all those characters is really cool.
Well, on top of that too, if you had him get killed off and he was a likable enough character, and then on top of that, then you have Han Solo getting killed off. I mean, geez, this movie is not fun, in that way. Whereas at least you have him being that, like, he's the cowboy pilot in that way. And I mean, basically the 3 of them are the heart for me of the movie and stuff. And it's like Kylo Ren, he interests me on a level of like, he's got too much power, but he doesn't have the temperament to deal with that.
Yeah, he doesn't have the control.
He doesn't have the control, and I mean, some of my favorite moments for him are just the moments where he's just beating the crap out of random scenery in the movie, and how the stormtroopers react to that, and the generals or the higher ups in the First Order react to that. Like that moment where they turn the corner and they see what's going on. they just turn right around. They don't even say a word. It's just they turn
and
around.
I love the moment when it makes me laugh because Kylo Ren's not a funny character. Or he's not supposed to be funny, and it's not funny like haha. But to me, it was an amusing moment when the one officer walks in at the beginning, and he's like, "Well, you know, the droid, you know, escaped on a freighter," and he's like, "The droid stole a freighter."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, I had help from FN, you know, 2187."
Yeah.
And he gets angry, and he's like, "Anything else?" And like, they were accompanied by a girl, and then it was just like this snap, and he's like, "What girl?" You know, it's like, so, you know, maybe there is some history that he might know about. He might know something about Rey. I know people have been talking, but I think it's just like, okay, so there's this third element to this story that he was not expecting, and he's like, I need to know because, you know, this is not what I anticipated.
Yeah.
That's the way I took it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of other people are speculating that he knows who Rey is, and like there's this inner conflict and everything.
I'm really hoping that that's not the case.
If they do, I hope they do it well. Other than like, oh yeah, you're my daughter. And then, you know, and they're cousins or whatever. But
I'm just hope.
I kind of hope they don't at this point.
I'm kind of like. I'm done with the whole thing of everybody needs to be related in these movies.
Because that starts to get creepy after a while.
It gets creepy, and it also just makes me look at things and go like, well, why can't somebody not be related for once? You know, I mean, I don't need to
have banjos in space?
Well, it is a long time ago. You never know. I mean, okay, like, so for me, Force Awakens, like I said, first viewing in the theater, it didn't wow me like I was hoping for. But then again, the amount of just, you know, the fan expectation going into this one was really hard to top. I mean, it's like there's no way around it. There are going to be people who aren't going to like it, and there are going to be people who love it. And there's in-betweeners as well. It's not as polarizing, I think, as the other movie we reviewed. But yeah, on the second viewing tonight, I gotta say I'm more won over than I was on the opening weekend, and I actually want to see it again a few more times. To be honest, when it was even in theaters, I really wanted to try one more attempt to go see it. I just never had the time. So I'm glad I got the chance to do it. I plan to get the Blu-ray at some point, and I mean it's the, you know, Rey, I want to see what happens with her, to be honest. There was more to her performance in this second viewing for me than there was in the first, for some reason. Like, there's these little moments she has with the character, with an expression or with a reaction or something, where I felt like, you know, there's more implied to the character than they're letting on, and that made me, you know, invest in her a bit more. And like the whole thing with oh, she's a Mary Sue. I don't look at it that way anymore like that. I view it as, you know, she's someone who's dabbling in things now. Her mind's opened to what else can I do, because I'd imagine her fighting back against Kylo Ren in that interrogation moment was enough for her to go, if I can actually make him not read my mind here, what else can I do? So she's trying the Jedi mind trick, and like I said, I think she's a little bit of a geek about stuff, because that moment with, you know, Luke Skywalker and all, and just the way that she did that, that's almost like if you or I got to hear somebody go, hey, I'm best friends with Jim Lee, and we're like, really? You know, I mean, that it's that kind of a feeling to it. I like Finn. I mean, I don't want to say he's the comic relief, but I like Finn as a character because he's constantly being caught in a lie in this movie a lot of the time, but you still kind of go, you know what, dude, I understand why you're doing this. You're not doing it for horrible reasons. You're doing it because you realized how horrible your situation was. For all the right reasons. Yeah, and I like that about it. I like that he's seen that, you know, things can be better if he got away from what he was going through and all that stuff. And that moment in the beginning with the raid on the village and whatnot, with the stormtroopers and the hand sliding the blood across his mask, I never would have thought that was going to be such a cool visual until I saw it, and I'm like, that's it's very telling.
Yeah.
You know, even though their aim sucks, every now and then, there's these moments. But yeah, I loved that. Poe is a great character. I enjoy him every time he shows up. So yeah, I mean the new generation is great. The fact that they got back, like you said, the original three, and the fact that they got Han. I want to call him Han Solo, not Harrison Ford. They got Harrison Ford, and he didn't just do Harrison Ford. Yeah. He was Han Solo. It was basically, if you watch Jedi, which that's something I'd like to do at some point, watch the original trilogy and then watch this one. It feels like this is Han Solo. Yeah, there's no way around it. He's legit Han Solo.
I mean, we talked about how, the romance between Han and Leia, and it's like, okay, they got together, they had a kid, the kid went horrible and it drove them apart, but that fits the characters we saw in Empire and Jedi. Yeah, like the hopeless romantic in me wanted them to, like, get swept off their feet and go live happily ever after. But even in the old expanded universe, things didn't play out nicely for them.
Yeah.
Granted, it's a little different in this one because, the First Order is such an immediate threat or prolonged threat. I think a lot of the expanded universe with those characters would have been, would have set the world in a very different place at this point by the time this movie's set. Mm-hmm. With the whole Yuzan Vong and all that stuff, but that's a whole other thing. But like, it makes sense for the characters, who they were in the original trilogy to who they are now. Like Han says, I went back to the only thing I ever knew, and she's like, we both did.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have each other, so they went back to the next best thing. And, because they couldn't see around, and it fits the characters. It would have been nice if they could have been that happy family, but,
Well, and that's the thing. Like, Han was one of those characters that I can't really see him being comfortable in. He's like, not Sam Gamgee. Position.
He doesn't want to go home and tend his garden with his wife and kids.
But I also don't see him going to diplomatic events and fitting in there either, like how Leia would have been.
Yeah, like
in that way,
there was no playing house with them.
No, and I as weird as it was to hear both of them admit, well, we went back to what we were good at. In the way of the fact that they're dealing with the loss of their son, and not in a loss where he's dead, but in a loss where he's rejected them. Yeah, he's rejected them, and they can't get him back. It makes sense that you need some sort of a normal whatever to have as a touchstone to move forward.
Yeah,
and at least like rebuild your life again. And in the case of both of them, I at first I hated that because I'm like, well, geez, like this is 30 years later, but when you put it in that perspective, it's like, yeah, it would make sense that Han would just go, look, I was a scoundrel and a smuggler. I'm good. Like I can do, if it wasn't for all the stuff that led me to the point of becoming a father, I probably would have just stuck with that for life. And that would have been my thing, and that was, and the fact that I love that every time he says something, Chewie is constantly like talking behind his back in this one, and it's these little beats. Han
Solo, the war hero, and Chewie's like,
Chewie just like, Chewie's like great comedy relief in this without.
When have I ever lied to you? Yeah, or when have I ever let you down? Once, twice, and Chewie's like, yeah. No, I'll do what I always do. I'll talk my way out of it. And Chewie's like, yes, I do. Every time. It's like he's trying to convince himself.
Yeah, they did a great job with him, and
yeah. And I love that Chewie goes off with Rey at the end, and that look he gives her when they're taken off. Like he's there, he's kind of got his head cocked forward, and he looks at her like it's like he has fully accepted her in.
Yeah.
Now, whatever she is to anyone else in the universe, like I have hopefully like she and Chewie stay together. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that like as a pairing, but like like Han and Chewie were like, I like them together.
I'm very excited to see how that works out of most of the things that the movie leaves as questions right now. That to me, I've always enjoyed, like, you set the standard of this is your world, or these are the main characters, and then You appreciate then when the normal is gone and you have a different lineup at some point. Like, that's part of why, like, in comics like X-Men and JLA and Justice League or whatever, I always like that you have, here's your peanut butter and jelly version of this, the go-to ones. And then, like, all of a sudden you take a few characters out and you put in somebody different and you see how that works. And that's kind of how the ending works with them and the Falcon for me. It's like, in my head, I'm already imagining them on adventures. And that's cool to me because at least, like, you know, they're giving you the nod that this is maybe how it's going to go from now on. Like, Rey is going to be the captain of the Falcon. Chewie's going to have her back. And, you know, the fact that the captain of the Falcon now is wielding a lightsaber on top of that, that's interesting to me because it's opposite. Well, I hope so. Maybe, I'll say that. I hope so.
Maybe Finn ends up going and becoming a Jedi in training or whatever. Who knows? I mean, I'm just saying there's a lot of possibilities.
I like that Finn had the lightsaber for a while. And I like the fact that when Kylo Ren showed up and he saw what he did, that Kylo threw Rey into the tree with his Force push powers, that was his moment finally. And in the preview, I was a little like, is he going to be the Jedi character? Oh my gosh. And then when you see how it all works out, it's like, no, but that was his moment. And he actually shined for a little while. He didn't like... He didn't roll over. And I did find it funny though. Watching it tonight, they have that he says the line, which to me is like that's his line of owning this role. Finally, it's like, you know, come and get it. You know, it's like that's cool. But what amused me though is he didn't let him come and get it. He ran at him after that. It's like, just stick by your word, dude. You don't have to be that. Like, make him come to you, you know. But in that way, it's like, you know, I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed that you had a character that didn't quite understand what he was getting into, wielding a power that he didn't necessarily know what to do with other than, I guess I'm just going to hit stuff with this. And he did all right with it. I mean, it didn't bother me. I know there's a lot of people out there like, well, how did he know how to do that so quickly? It's like, if anybody grabs a sword in a situation, you kind of have a basic idea of what to do with this.
If you watch what he does with it, and remember, he's a stormtrooper, and despite all the jokes people make about stormtroopers having horrible aim, which I don't buy that entirely, and they've got ridiculous helmets on. You know, their vision is limited, but stormtroopers are like trained soldiers. Like they're gonna know how to defend themselves with a variety of weapons. Like they don't know how to just use guns. Like our military, they know how to use more than just a specific weapon. They specialize in different things, but like, you know, and he clearly doesn't know how to use a lightsaber, but and the whole concept of, you know, only someone who is trained as a Jedi knows how to use a lightsaber. I think it takes the Force to do it well. But I mean, Han takes the lightsaber in Empire and cuts open the tauntaun. And granted, you know, that probably didn't require a lot of skill, but you know.
Well, if you want to go back to that comic moment that we talked about, I mean, they used them in there and they managed to get out of the situation that they were in.
Yeah, you know, so it's you know, it's a glorified baseball bat. You know, and I could swing a baseball bat and cause some damage, but someone who is trained how to use a sword would take that same baseball bat and do a whole different set of damage.
Well, I mean, I look at it too, like, I don't remember or not whether they did this, but I was trying to watch it tonight to pick this up. He didn't use it to deflect any blaster bolts or anything like that. He just basically used it as, I'm going to just whip this and just... He was more the blunt force object.
The first thing he does is he runs it through another stormtrooper. I was like, cool. You know, that just went through that guy. That's a blue lightsaber sticking out of the back of that stormtrooper, you know. That's pretty intense. You know, and then he fights one of his other squadron buddies with the baton.
Yeah, the riot guy, or I guess they call him a riot trooper or something, which I didn't even know they had those until this.
He had riot gear, but like, because that was one of the, again, that's one of the things in the other build-up stuff is that the First Order was going around trying to placate riots where the Republic wasn't doing things, so they were kind of it was kind of this false propaganda stuff. They would go in and they would call calm riots with extreme violence, kind of a thing.
Okay.
And anyway,
that
again, that's more extra reading stuff. But yeah, they were it's. And again, in one of the before the Force Awakens or before the Awakening, you meet Finn and his 3 other squadron troops, or his squad that he's the leader of. At the guy that dies at the beginning with the blood on Finn's mask is one of them, and then I can't remember. I think it's FN 2199 is the one with the baton that calls him the traitor, and they start fighting there on Takana or whatever, and they say in that story that they were trained with weapons to defend against lightsabers, even though none of them had ever seen a lightsaber, So there's this whole sparring, if you can defend against a weapon, you probably know how to use that weapon to attack with, because you would have had to spar with something to simulate that defense.
That for me, not knowing the build-up stuff to this, it did sort of surprise me that he's got a weapon that can counter a lightsaber in that part, but I kind of
which we have seen before in the Star Wars movies.
Where
a different version of it, the vibro pikes or whatever that General Grievous's droids use.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about those. All right, never mind. You got me there. I completely forgot about that because prequels. But no, I completely forgot about that. But it's for me watching the movie on opening night, I was like, well, that's really weird that thing can actually withstand the hit of a lightsaber. But I guess anything with an electrical-ish charge or something, and granted, it's probably different.
I'm not even going to try to think.
But yeah, I'm betting that's going to be part of the argument about it or whatever. So okay, but yeah, that I'll give you that. Okay. Prequels. Prequels, whatever.
Well, and I know a lot of people complained about the Kylo Ren lightsaber from the trailer. I'm sorry, I thought it was awesome, and when I read the explanation as to why, they don't give you one in the movie. You don't really need one. It looks cool. It has extra fight. He uses it to burn a hole in Finn's arm during the fight. That was okay. That was all the reason I needed.
Yeah, I mean,
without reading the other stuff. That was enough.
Well, he's the character. I didn't really notice it till this second viewing, but he's the character that it seems to me like if he's up against somebody that he just figures is worthy or whatever, he will go and get in there with them. So it makes sense that his weapon would be something where all he has to do is turn it just a little bit, and he can still inflict pain on them somehow. And so in that way, it's not a lightsaber to make the character look cool. It's a lightsaber as an extension of the character.
Yeah.
Unlike Darth Maul, for instance.
When you get the explanation for why the two, the cross guard is there, they're calling it, why that's there, and actually in all the the dictionary, the cross sections or whatever they explain, it's because his lightsaber is not a fully finished, refined lightsaber.
Yeah, because of the blade being a little wonky.
Like you said, it's an extension of him as a character.
Yeah.
He's not a fully refined character either. His stuff is so intense and the crystal is damaged or something that the heat and the power of the weapon is so strong that just the single port for the blade isn't enough. It's got those 2 extra exhausts, but he's used that into a weapon and it cut his fingers off, and it's there's a cross guard. I mean, there's metal there. It's not like it's sitting right on his fingers. I mean, it's in the picture.
No, I like that. I thought that was a great example of, he, through his weapon, this is giving you an idea of who this guy is. And, it was weird in the first couple of scenes in the movie to look at his saber and go, that's not how I remember lightsabers looking. But then when you realize, oh no, the others are normal. They're the ones that you're expecting.
Yeah, his is very rough.
I like that his is rough.
At the visuals of his lightsaber, and then when I saw it in the movie, when he freezes the blaster bolt that Poe takes at him, you see the energy in the blaster bolt is kind of vibrating and different things. It's very similar to the effect his lightsaber is giving off. And I thought that, I was like, okay, like, even if I hadn't read anything else at that point, seeing that, because they focus on that blaster bolt as he's walking by, it's like, okay, this is raw, energy doing whatever. So, again, it's a sci-fi fantasy movie. I mean, if you try to explain everything 100% scientifically, you take a lot of the fun and the dramatics out of the movie. Okay, yes, we know there's no fireballs in space. There wouldn't be the sound, and all this stuff. It's like, you know what? If I wanted to go to a Neil deGrasse Tyson lecture on space, I would. I want to watch Star Wars, and they're not the same thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, and Star Wars is always sci-fi fantasy instead of sci. It's not even sci-fi fantasy.
It's fantasy with a sci-fi flavor.
And
sci-fi. Did I say sci-fi?
Sci-fi.
I'm getting tired, I think.
Yeah. Well, it is late. We should wrap this up soon. But the whole thing, like, I think we both agree this is definitely a good beginning point into a new trilogy, and it does what it needs to do in order to bridge generational gap just within the fandom. I mean, you have people like us who enjoy the originals. You have fans out there who say the prequels are the way that they want to look at it. And you have people out there who have no investment in Star Wars, and they could go to this movie and they could at least get, this is the basic premise of this universe. Yeah. You have enough taste about the Force in there. You got enough idea of these characters. They're endearing characters, and they're characters you want to see moving forward, taking the franchise along and seeing their journey. I'd say, honestly, the only huge complaint that I have about the movie is they made a third Death Star. And I know a lot of people have that thing. It's like, I want to be in the board meeting for the people who sat there and go, you know what I think we need to do? Another Death Star. And I want to see how that guy managed to live with Kylo Ren around, beating the crap out of everything and exploding the scenery and stuff, because it didn't work well the first two times. And that really was my biggest complaint about the movie when I left the theater. And even still, it's like, that's your big plan. It's like, get her. That's your big plan. Get her.
But here's the thing. It worked.
It worked, but
it took out the New Republic.
All right.
All 5 planets in that system are gone.
It's true, but I guess here's the problem that I feel that this movie kind of got itself into now. It's like, going forward in this new trilogy, you have Kylo Ren out there, and he needs to be trained in the ways of becoming a Sith Lord at this point. But beyond that, and the First Order is kind of like, well, they're scattered to the wind now themselves because their base didn't work, and they got punked again, just like they did in 1977 and in 1983. So going forward, what is the bigger threat going on here? And it's like this movie, I feel, it doesn't have nearly the... Like, I get in the original Star Wars, the big threat you had out there was Vader was still a survivor. And that was about it. And they mentioned the Emperor, but you didn't know who the Emperor was. So, okay, you have that. So, in a way, it's like, yeah, you have the same echo of that. But I almost wish they had an overarching thing that was the problem, that by the third movie, it's, all bets are off. We got to do this or whatever. Yeah. And I kind of felt like I wish they didn't go there in this movie, as just from that standpoint, from a dramatic standpoint. But
see, that makes me more intrigued because their big base was destroyed. Snoke didn't seem too bothered by that.
Yeah,
he's
that's
like,
true.
Get Kylo Ren and come to me. Clear, like, it feels like Hux is clearly disappointed, but I think Hux and Snoke are operating on completely different wavelengths of what is important.
Hux, like I said to you before, Hux is so focused that, like, he only sees this.
He does. He's seriously, he is so
this is his point of view.
But like he gets, other than destroying the Resistance, he wipes out the new the New Republic. Like their system of government is gone. Now, granted, there's whatever's out there in the other systems, but the seat of power is gone.
Yeah, the power now is shifted to them again.
I mean, they're kind of on equal footing. You've got this broken First Order with a diminished whatever. I can't imagine that was all of their forces.
No.
But you also now have like a significantly crippled resistance, because I don't know if they sent all their X-Wing fighters, but if they sent all the X-Wing fighters they had to that base, only 8 came back, or less, plus the Falcon. Yeah, they're like, I think this movie has done something that the other ones have done. It remains to be seen in Episode 8 if this is where they go. It feels like they've made this a much smaller, more personal for everyone kind of threat to me. I mean, that's the potential they could go with it.
Okay.
Because, 2 people called Finn out for being a traitor. I'm sure there's probably some deleted scenes or unwritten script somewhere where Phasma calls him a traitor. Like there's all this going on, so you still have Hux, Kylo Ren, and Phasma. So you have 3 major. I'm assuming she survived. There's no way they introduced her, and she gets taken out in a trash compactor. She
gets the shaft, and I wouldn't say that's a negative, but it's really like mind-boggling to me that they put the time into. Here's this character, but you're only going to see her for 30 seconds of entire screen time.
Which makes me think there's going to be more to her coming
There
around.
will be, and I mean, granted, Boba Fett, he had probably in the lead up to Jedi, I'm guessing he had about the same amount of screen time, or maybe like all of 1 to 2 minutes.
If you don't count the
special
edition of New Hope,
yeah,
he's on the bridge and.
He's on the bridge when they hire the bounty hunters, and then he's after Han.
He's at the dinner table.
He's at the dinner table, and then he takes Han away on Slave One in Empire, and then at the beginning of Jedi, he's there.
He's just in the background in the palace,
he's maybe 5 minutes worth of screen time in both movies he's in. And the thing was with her, they built her up as, well, now this is the next Boba Fett. The way that I read it with the stuff leading up to this movie, and then when you get to the movie, it's like. Well, she's got about the same screen time, but like she was put at gunpoint and she gave in. I mean, that to me wasn't
Which
really...
again perpetuates my newly formed theory that she might not be everything she appears to be for the First Order.
Well,
but that's my thoughts.
And that's the
and my biggest complaint is that the movie ended.
He could have just kept going.
I could have sat there for another 3 hours.
So going forward, let's do a quick what you hope to see from
what I hope to see.
Maybe either the next movie or in the overarch of the next 2 movies. What do you hope might happen, and then we can revisit this when all those are done and go, boy, were we right or boy, were we wrong.
With the episode numbers, so 8 and 9 coming, what I hope to see is, I hope to see some whatever crazy tension in between Luke and Kylo Ren. Like, I think that's gonna be the fight, not Rey and Kylo Ren, or I think it will be a fight at some point.
I think that's personal because he was supposed to be training him anyway.
Because again, this is the flip side. Now you have the younger villain with the older hero, as opposed to the younger hero with the older villain.
Well, it's very much it's
family.
Shades, it's shades of Obi-Wan and Vader in New Hope in that way, and so that okay.
And if it comes to Luke having to put him down, I don't think it will be. And I really don't think they're going to pull punches and do kind of like, he falls and gets choked by a vine, kind of, Disney cartoon style, which works for the Disney cartoon. Yeah. But, I think there's going to be some definitely drama and tension between Luke and Kylo Ren. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of stuff going on with Rey and Kylo Ren. I think. Finn is going to have... I think Finn is going to struggle between choosing to fight with the Resistance and some other choice. Poe's going to keep being the pilot. and unless I know they're introducing some new characters, or they've announced, casting for some new characters already going into the next one. But so we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if Leia, Luke, or Chewie, one of the three of them, or one of the droids, gets completely destroyed before the trilogy is over. I think another one of the classic heroes will be gone before the trilogy is over. And what I want to see is, and I know this is maybe childish, happy ending, but
it's what ifs.
I want to see the end of the Empire, the end of the First Order. Obviously things won't ever stay completely peaceful, but I want to see that threat finally put down, snuffed out for good, and that they can at least try to strive for some peace that doesn't come with a overarching corrupt or weak government at the center. It's been interesting what they did with the initial stuff, what they've done through Clone Wars, how they show the Jedi siding with the Republic and how Palpatine's manipulating all that stuff, like the weaknesses, and that's interesting. But I want to, like we said, it's a fantasy with sci-fi leanings. I want to eventually get to a happy ending, whether we get that in this trilogy or if there's promise of another one. Eventually, I want to let some of these characters be able to, hang up their boots, and go home.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope some of these heroes get to do that without having to be shamed out of giving up or quitting or anything, and if they bring in some more new characters in the next one, I'll be all for that, because I think they've done a great job with this new cast. I think there's room for a couple of new ones, like one or two more new characters that are pivotal. It could be really cool. What I'd like to see is more alien characters that play a vital part. There's a lot of, you got Chewie. It's great to see Nia Nub back, and Admiral Akbar, which, rest in peace to, I feel bad, I don't remember the actor's name, but the guy who played Akbar recently passed away. But it was cool to see Nia Nub back, actually walking around, carrying his helmet and, gearing up to go on the attack and everything. And there was a couple other aliens in the fight. What I would really love to see, and I haven't been watching Rebels yet, so I don't know if this is something that could even happen, because I don't know the fate of this character at this point. I would love to see Ahsoka in live action in the movies. Whether it's in the trilogies or in one of the other standalones post Clone Wars story arc, past Rebels, because I know she's already alive in the Rebels story, which is in between Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. So I would love to see her come back at some point, or some other Jedi still out there in hiding. That would be really cool.
Let's see. Just going forward, I just hope they don't make another Death Star. That's gonna. I'm gonna call BS on that if they pull that in either the next one or the final one, because that's just gonna grate me, because they've already done it 3 times. If you can't pull it off the 3rd time, don't go back to the well on that one. I'm curious to see Luke's training of Rey, if that's where they go with this. To be honest, I'm curious to see, because it's like I said before, he got the Cliff Notes version of Jedi teaching in a way. He basically was we need to give him as much information as we can to turn him into a living weapon, and if he can't do what we need him to do, then obviously we got one left and we're okay. But we're going to give him, this is how you do what you need to do, go team, and just send him out. So I'm going to be very curious to see that, because it obviously didn't go well for him anyway, based on him having his problem with Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren and all that. So it's just, that's one of those things I'm very much looking forward to seeing going forward. I'm curious to see how they handle Finn in the next ones.
I will say with that, though, real quick, Obi-Wan, who was fully trained in the height of the Jedi Order, also failed to train Anakin.
Yeah.
Lost him to the dark side. So
it's true.
So it's an interesting cycle.
It is. It's different in that case for me though, because it was during a war.
Well, no,
and they weren't even trying to become warriors, and they had to become. So it's like in that way, it's a little bit different. But I know where you're going with that. I understand. It's just, you know, that's one of those things to me where it's like the way that they painted that whole thing out, I could see how that would go wrong. Whereas the other way around, it's like, well, there wasn't any war going on at that moment. What brought Kylo Ren to that point? You know, how did that all?
With Obi-Wan being a fully trained Jedi, Luke being Cliff Notes Jedi. That's what I meant. Like,
yeah,
you know, so even one who had been fully trained failed his Padawan in a way, or at least he felt that he did.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm curious with that. I am curious to see if they show training Kylo Ren finally, because we've never seen a Sith getting trained. Mm-hmm. It's always like they have that talk in the prequels with Palpatine telling Anakin what the deal is with how, you know, they can manipulate the Force to create life and all that. But beyond that, you don't really get like a training. Really? Well, that's the only thing I have to go on in this case, unfortunately. Besides Vader saying, you know, I will complete your training and all this. It's like, well, what does that entail? It doesn't really get into it. So I would like that interests me because they're going. It sounds like they're willing to go there in these. I'm curious to see if Rey ends up going through with all this, because she's a reluctant character, and you know, like, will the ending of this trilogy be her going back to Jakku and just waiting for her parents, or maybe she gets, you know, does that resolve itself? That's a what if too to me. Like, I'd be curious to see how that resolves itself. Maybe Luke helps her with that. I don't know. I am curious to see what happens with Finn, because he's a character that, going into the rest of these movies, it's like, well, what exactly, what role is he going to play, you know, going forward? Poe to me is cool. I want to see more Poe. I want to be able to I want to see them go on missions.
Yeah. I
want to see the two of them have adventures together. And if it turns out that it's more than a bromance with them, good. Okay. If it turns out it's a bromance and they're just good friends and they got each other's backs, that's awesome too. I'm cool with it. I want to know who Snoke is.
Yeah.
Is he like 3 feet tall? Is he like the new Yoda? Because there is the question right now of, you know, with him being a hologram, well, maybe he's using that in order to establish fear, and maybe he's just this like little like Yoda-like character. Yeah, and I like that. I like that in this case we have the bad guy doing something like that instead of like the Emperor was just the Emperor in the last one. So who is he and what's the deal with him? But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, it's, you know, I'm more on board than I was, and now, you know, I'm looking forward to Rogue One this year. I want to go see that one, and looking forward to Episode 8 next December, if I remember right. Yes. And going forward from there, and just see what else happens. I mean, these spin-offs are interesting to think about too, and, you know, how that's gonna be a whole universe and whatnot. And I still feel, like I said earlier, I still feel George Lucas is hurt because he couldn't figure out how to build the universe how Marvel has done it. That's something to think about here. I want to try to close really quick on this. So you have Marvel, basically, okay. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg in the 70s reinvented cinema accidentally by Star Wars, Jaws, and all of these big blockbuster movies that nobody had an idea were going to be the way that they were going to turn into. So going forward, that's been the template for movies up until this point, until 2008. And then you had Iron Man. And then Iron Man from that point on now has introduced the idea of creating a actual universe of these things where you can mix and match and tell offshoot stories with these characters and whatnot. And there's a part of me that actually thinks that George Lucas is a little upset that he didn't figure that out in order to make more money from how he was doing the other stuff, because he was so focused on the trilogies and the prequel and the original trilogy. So it's interesting though, because we actually have witnessed a shift in cinema, and I don't think anybody, I think people are recognizing it, but they're not recognizing it on the level that now it's become in that way, where Star Wars now is embracing the Marvel way, because now they're doing their spin-offs, and it's universe building. It's not just telling a story in a galaxy far, far away. It's, this is the universe in a galaxy far, far away, and that's pretty cool too. Rogue One's exciting. We'll see what happens with all this stuff. So anyway, to close up, final thoughts.
If you haven't seen this movie and you're still watching this video,
why are
I
you
strongly
here?
encourage you
Go see it.
to stop watching, go to Redbox or some store, buy or rent the movie, and watch it already. It's way more entertaining than we are.
Yeah.
I mean, we enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, but trust me, for me, there is nothing that we have done or said is nearly as cool as the moment where, for instance, Kylo Ren has Finn on the ropes, and he's trying to get the lightsaber using the Force. Luke's, or actually Anakin's lightsaber, and it goes past him and it lands in Rey's hands.
Well, and here's I'm going to take this to a morbid place real quick. As cool as it was to see Rey get that lightsaber, I love that. Like, I almost stood up and cheered in the theater, and I never do that. Someone pointed out to me that lightsaber is the same lightsaber that killed all the kids in the Jedi Temple.
Well, shit.
Exactly.
On that note,
but no,
it's got some redemption now.
But then again, it's got to have some redemption with and I think Luke was on his way with it and everything. It's just, I was like, wow, that's interesting. That's really heavy.
I could have swore that was a red lightsaber.
He didn't have a red lightsaber. He goes to that whole fight with Obi-Wan on Mustafar with that lightsaber.
That's right, because he just turned right before that.
Yep.
He didn't make a new lightsaber.
Yep, and now, we talk about Batman v Superman, but like that moment alone when he walks into that room of younglings and turns on his lightsaber.
Yeah.
That's like, that is one of the darkest things I've ever seen.
For me, like watching that moment, and when I saw that, I was always like, oh, you didn't need to show me that.
But at least it was one moment.
It was one moment, not 2.5 hours.
Speaking of 2.5 hours, but yeah, no, I can't say enough good things about The Force Awakens. I mean, the designs, everything about it was great.
Practical effects.
A lot, yeah, so many practical effects. I mean, actually watch BB-8 when he pulls the cover off of R2-D2, like, he's got the 6 different orange compartments around his body, right? When his little arm comes out, he doesn't just roll back, and it doesn't just roll with his body. Like, his body rolls, and the orange compartment within the body rolls as well. It's just little things like that I found really fascinating. When he's bouncing around in the Falcon as it's flying around, and he shoots his little, spider droid does whatever spider droid can, and then he uses it to climb out of the pit later, and just all these little things. And then I love the moment when Rey comes over the sand dune and she sees him being captured by Tito in the net, in the sand and everything, and she yells at them, and they both turn, like just, he's got such personality. They just did such a great job with him, and everything else. It was just, the movie was, it's the best movie for me that I've seen in theaters, had an experience with in a long time. It took me back to 1983 when I saw Return of the Jedi at the Capital City Mall, where the food court is now. I mean, it's a vivid memory for me, and this movie is now etched in my mind in that moment. So, Brendan and Josh, who went with me, you were, and who else was there? Megan and Tyler, you sat with us too, through that whole movie. You were right there with us, and we were all like, there was little like rumblings and stuff back and forth through all of us, and it was just a great night. And I'll always have that memory of seeing that in that theater here and everything. So So yeah, it was a blast. I had a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what Rogue One does. It feels like it's going to be a very different flavor, yet still in the Star Wars world. And I can't wait to see what Ryan Johnson does with or Rain. I don't know.
I think it's Ryan.
Ryan Johnson does with Episode 8 and where that goes. So yeah, that's what I've got.
I liked it. I'm a converted fan because, like I said, the first time it didn't do it for me as much as I was hoping. But with the amount of build up to this movie, there were a lot of people out there who were like, I don't need to see another movie for the rest of my life because it's always just going to be, this is the movie that broke me for all the other movies or ruined me for other movies. It didn't do that for me, but it's fun. I mean, that's all I can ask for sometimes. It needs to be fun. It needs to be, something engaging and make me care about the characters. And, going forward, having fun with those characters and, cheering their wins and being sad for their losses and whatnot. And it did a really good job of that, too, especially the Han Solo death. I still didn't cry over that, but it's like
I
still
was close.
There is a part right here.
I think I was just so caught up in the visual aspect of it. Watching, Kylo Ren's there holding the lightsaber, and you actually watch the light leave him because the light of the sun is dying as they're draining it. He's got the blue and the red, and then as soon as that blue completely fades off his face and he's all red, it's like, okay, he's all dark side now.
Yeah. He gave
is there a chance, at least in that moment? And that's when the lightsaber goes on, and the fact that Han kind of repeats the hand on the face gesture from that happens to Finn at the beginning with his stormtrooper buddy and everything. It's just there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and there's more things to that than I expected. Again, rewatching it tonight, I realized how those moments played out and whatnot a little better, and I was glad to see those. But yeah, I'm definitely curious to see what happens, and I'm just hoping I can't predict everything. That's the only main thing I have going into the next two movies. But this, it's you had a feeling of old with new, nods to the past. Going forward, I'd like to not have the nods there as much. I'd like it just to go full force into new stuff if possible. So we'll see what happens with that.
Force. You said force.
I didn't try that. It's late. It is what it is. But anyway, yeah.
May the force be with you.
So here's our second review, and again, I'm Shawn the Baldy.
I'm Jesse the Beardy.
And may the force be with you.
Peace.